Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This engine going together now is actually the one out of the Corolla, my own car. It's a Sunday, so it's the only time I really get to do any of my own shit. And it's out and apart because I wanted to have a look at it. It was showing some signs that something wasn't 100% right. It still started, ran fine, done everything I had good oil pressure, but it wasn't making the power. I'm not sure if you've seen the previous video of it on the dyno. We did actually get back on the dyno. We eliminated that third runner, that center runner, the primary port, and it didn't respond. It a bit of a nugget. So yeah, that was the first indication that maybe something wasn't quite happy, and needed to investigate and find out what it was. So the engine's out, it was pulled apart, and it became apparent pretty quickly that whilst we hadn't lost compression, like I said, the engine started fine. Like you wouldn't have thought there was anything wrong with it. You could see that there was signs that the apex seal was actually starting to transfer itself onto the rotor housing. And the apex seals were, they've got a sharp edge on them, and normally you'll get that for one or two reasons. It's usually if you've got a really sharp edge on your exhaust port or intake port, and it being a PP, that the seal flexes and it catches on that closing face. But these exhaust ports and intakes are really quite heavily radius, so that definitely wasn't the cause of the seal. And the seal hasn't failed. It's just it was an Atkins seal that probably not really designed or to suit the purpose that I was using it for. They've been in there for about 5 odd years. It was only sort of recently that we started to play with the engine and start to try and make power with it. But what it looks like has happened is just we're revving the engine to nearly 11,000. And that's not what I had anticipated for this engine to do, but the apex seal basically wasn't steady across the rotor housing, and it started to move around a little bit and transfer some material. Being soft, it started to transfer material into the rotor housing. So I'll give you a look at that. Now, I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick it up too clearly. Yeah, you can probably see a bit there. You can see those marks down here. That's basically cast iron transferred itself onto the chrome. It hasn't. Oh yeah, there's a good spot you can see there. Now you can polish these back. I mean, I've run some paper over it, but I will end up putting some acid over that to take the cast iron off of the chrome. You can see it's reasonably big intake port, but it is radiused. You can sort of see that. It's got quite a big radius in there. The rotors themselves, they were fine. There's no damage on them whatsoever. All the corner seals, side seals, all great. And you can see they've been sealing up quite well. There's no carbon or anything on the inside here. I did put a set of bearings in it. It had actually started to pick up a front gear bearing, and that was a self-inflicted issue, which is probably a little bit too embarrassing to elaborate any further on, but that was 100% my fault. The rest, so like I said, the rest of the engine's fine. Now, on the apex seal, you can kind of see on this, by this line here, you can see where it dips down, and when you feel the back edge of that, it's actually quite sharp. And in fact, if I was to run that across my nail, that's actually cutting some nail away. A few other marks that were on there, you can see that edge there, and they correlate to the rotor housing where they line up, where it's actually literally just putting the material back into the apex seal. Still started, ran fine, like I said. That one's a really sharp one there. You really feel that. So next step is we're actually going to put in some ceramic apex seals. Now the ceramic is obviously a lot harder than the chrome, and these won't wear, and being the structural integrity is so much stiffer across the beam, these won't flex into a port, so it will eliminate a potential issue if it was flexing into the port, and that's what's sort of caused it to start eating itself up. And if the radius is not good enough on the port, the ceramic won't be affected by that. They're a one-piece design, obviously, you can see, versus the two-piece. The assist piece for these is in the box. They'll go in the bin, there's no further use for those. So yeah, these are the power seals, ceramic seals. They take the standard Mazda spring, however, we've just got to not flatten the edge, you've got to grind a lip on it, just so that when that seal moves in and down, when the apex seal's going up and down, you can see that seal's not going to actually try and bite into. It's got a flat edge on there, so it's not trying to dig itself into the apex seal itself. The inners are standard. Got a nice big radius in there. So yeah, that's what's going to go into it now. Everything's been cleaned up. I've run through the rotors and had a look at them. Everything's perfect in there. I've put 2 bearings in the rotors, and I've put 1 gear bearing in the front, and just basically cleaned everything up, and yeah, we'll put it back together and see how it goes. And the same with the other rotor housing, you just see those little spots on there. That's just apex seal falling away. Alright, there's the engine wrapped up for the Corolla. I'll get that downstairs, and maybe next Sunday we'll skip church again and fit the engine to the car. Anyone who's regular probably noticed I've made another intake manifold for this, so I'm going to try this dual plenum design. Don't know if it works, don't know what results I'm going to get. 4-cylinder stuff seems to be pretty popular on. Way back in the Group B rally days, they had some success with it, so I'll give it a try on the rotary and see what it does. First thing I noticed with the ceramic apex seals, being a one piece, I thought they might be a bit low on comp, but they're surprisingly it's got really good comp. They're sealing up really well. So interesting to see how they go as well, and yeah, looking forward to getting it back in the car and seeing if we can make the power on chasing. Yeah, so thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.